Hi guys, this is Lyra with Astrology by Lyra, here to talk about the upcoming Cancer new moon taking place on June 28th for those in the United States, and for those on the other side of the world in Australia, it would be taking place on June 29th. Now, before I get into the specifics of the Cancer new moon, I do want to make note that this is the third month of the current eclipse cycle that we are in. You could say chapter 3 of the themes that the eclipses back in May, the Taurus solar eclipse on April 30th, and the Scorpio lunar eclipse on May 16th, we're calling for. And we are quickly reaching the midpoint of this 6-month chapter, which means we are soon to be seeing the tangible, in-your-face manifestations of what those eclipses called for. And so I do think it's important that we keep in mind the themes of the eclipses as we get ready to approach the midpoint and beyond at the end of this month. So let's go back to month number 1 with the Taurus solar eclipse and the Scorpio lunar eclipse. Now, I want to start by just reviewing the Sabian symbol for these eclipses. The Taurus new moon solar eclipse at 10 degrees of Taurus was the development of the powers of the mind on which ego consciousness is based. And the Scorpio full moon lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Scorpio, the ability to adjust swiftly to a new situation by tuning into its requirements. Now, just looking at the Sabian symbols, there's so much to be inferred there with the Mercury retrograde that was taking place, the Mercury retrograde that, as I said back in May, was really calling our minds to a higher level of attention, to really stay focused, not allow ourselves to get distracted, that there would be a lot of potential sleights of hand to try to get us distracted. And there were a lot of lessons over the month of May and June because the Mercury retrograde overlapped both of those months, to learn from those lessons, and we will certainly want to take that with us. These lessons are meant to be carried forth throughout the entire 6 months. So it was with the Taurus new moon solar eclipse and the Scorpio lunar eclipse all within the Taurus new moon cycle that we initiated not only a new month of upgrades with the Taurus new moon cycle, but because it was an eclipse, it means a new chapter, a new 6-month chapter was beginning that would run all the way through to October when the next eclipse cycle begins. And if you'll remember, I called the Taurus new moon cycle one of reprioritization, one that really called us to look at our values, our resources, money dynamics, and make some needed changes in our lives. Now, wrenches were thrown into the mix, as I said, because we had the Mercury retrograde. The universe was, I guess you could say, testing us on our ability to stay focused, remembering that we are part of a spiritual journey here on this life plane, and that we are always evolving. We're always meant to evolve into a higher level of consciousness. And so the Mercury retrograde was there to show us the importance of staying focused, especially when it comes to needed reprioritizations that were coming through. And just to give an example, this was really the new moon cycle, the Taurus new moon cycle, where we started to see more clearly the issues of inflation, the issues of rising prices with electricity, at the pump, with food, and needing to take those signs seriously and not allow ourselves to get distracted. Now, an example of the distraction that came through for those in the United States and also around the world was the Johnny Depp trial and the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial that caught a lot of the attention of the public away from the more important issues of economic downturn. So the Taurus new moon cycle was calling for reprioritizations, and it set the tone for what we could expect over the next 6 months. Now, there were other themes or other elements to this overarching theme that were indicated from the Taurus solar eclipse, the 2 eclipses that we had in May. Now, I'll quickly review them once again. I've reviewed them before in the previous videos, but I think it's always nice to review them each month. So that Taurus new moon solar eclipse and the Scorpio lunar eclipse had a couple of messages with them. One, with the Saturn being in a square to the nodal axis. I have a video on the nodal axis. This, for me, was really saying that we would have a deepening of bifurcations, more polarizations in the collective, more lines being drawn, the lines between the 2 sides even more clearly defined. We would also have sudden disruptions in the tangible world. And we certainly saw that come through with, again, the inflation, the increase of prices at the gas pump, with electricity, with food, and also food shortages being called out globally. And on a personal level, these bifurcations were really between those that are distracted or versus those that are staying intuitively attuned to the undercurrents of what's going on and making needed reprioritizations in their lives, taking intuitive, inspired action to stay focused with the real, more important matters at hand. Also with Saturn, square the nodal axis. Saturn rules governments, rules authority figures, that there would be mass restructuring in authority, that also, because it was in a square to the nodal axis, there was bifurcations happening at the government level where some being drawn to the south node of Scorpio, doubling down on more coercive, manipulative, underhanded tactics. Again, you'll want to look at that south node in Scorpio, north node in Taurus video that I have. Just as equally, those that were stepping up with more integrity, more transparency, more focus on solid values and principles. And with the Mercury retrograde, lots of uncomfortable truths coming out, lots of distraction, a need to think differently. And one of the most important lessons from that Mercury retrograde, ones that really came through last month, was about being able to use our minds and tune into our intuition more. Again, all about staying focused and really paying attention to the signs and synchronicities around us. And last but not least, there are beautiful messages from the eclipse, and that is that there's opportunities from all this sudden disruption to forge new value systems forward, to stand up for what is right with solid principles and values that are consistent, not just for you, not just for me, but for everyone. Consistent, solid values and principles, and a need to step up with self-reliance to uphold those. So that was what the Taurus new moon and Scorpio full moon lunar eclipses were calling forth as far as themes. And then with last month's Gemini new moon, month number 2 or chapter 2 of this eclipse cycle, we had the Gemini new moon, and Gemini all to do with our minds, and I called it the mind over matter new moon. And it kind of took that Mercury retrograde, the lessons from that, and saying, did you learn your lesson? Again, this need to stay very much focused, especially with the Neptunian energies that came around mid-month, with the Sagittarius full moon square Neptune. Lots of confusion, lots of disorientation, and ones that kind of spit us out by the last quarter moon. Last quarter moon happened on June 21st, and all of a sudden we're in this kind of new paradigm, new sense of reality, new information coming in, new decisions being made, a new paradigm that we are faced with. And again, this certainly would be playing out in the collective, but also in our personal lives. And as we're getting ready to step into the Cancer new moon, I just want to talk about the Gemini season again. Again, there was this theme of being able to upgrade ourselves, our intuitive selves during the month. And certainly right now, as if you're watching this before the Cancer new moon, maybe you realize that there were something that you came into as far as new information, new awareness over this last week. That was part of the harvest. But if you can, and certainly things that might be heavy, some new information, a new sense of reality that's not comfortable. Yet the harvests were saying that, can you connect dots? Because Gemini season is all about our minds and mind over matter, were you able to stay focused and kind of connect dots and intuitively see that this was coming in? And some of the dates that I've talked on the membership group about, especially they relate to the Mercury retrograde. So some of those key dates were April 30th, May 7th, May 22nd, June 3rd, June 11th, June 14th, and June 21st. So if we can look at the harvest of the last moon cycle being all to do with our minds, all to do with our ability to stay very focused, our ability to connect dots, especially intuitive dots, then I would say that we won, regardless of the new information coming in, regardless of the heaviness of it. It's more about the takeaway is about our level of intuition, remembering the Sabian symbol for the Taurus new moon cycle, which is all about development of the powers of the mind so that we could act swiftly to a change of scenes. All right, so now we are moving into the Cancer new moon cycle, and this is what I'm going to be focusing most of my attention for this video. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we are approaching the midpoint of the eclipse at the end of this moon cycle. So this is certainly not a time to get ourselves distracted. It's definitely one that we want to pay attention to and honor the lessons and the challenges that are coming up ahead with this moon cycle that are helping us make the upgrades. Now, before I get into the specifics of the Cancer new moon, I just wanted to ask a favor, and that is if you like this video, if you like the content, to please like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget that I do have 2 subscriptions that you can find on my website at www.astrologybylyra.com for more navigational tips, more daily and weekly navigational tips. And I do have 2 types of subscriptions that you can check out, again, on my website under the tab subscribe. All right, so we'll go ahead and continue on and get into this Cancer new moon cycle. So we have the Cancer new moon coming in on June 28th for those in the continental US, June 29th for myself, I'm on the other side of the world, as well as Australia, those in Australia and Europe. All right, so the Cancer new moon is coming in, and as always, a new moon cycle lasts for a month. And while on my membership group, I get into the specifics of 4 different moon phases for the sake of keeping things relatively short on this YouTube channel and more concise to the point. This Cancer new moon comes in with its own set of themes, new situations, seeding, and it isn't always in the first 2 weeks of each moon cycle that it can be more challenging, because we are setting intentions to make needed changes in our lives, to make needed changes within ourselves, and we must do the work in order to make those changes. And so it is in the first 2 weeks that this would be considered the shadow work for those that are aware of the spiritual journey. And then it is when the full moon comes around, in this case the Capricorn full moon on July 13th and the 2 weeks afterwards, that we start to feel the breakthroughs, that we start to see the benefits of the changes that we have made or have worked on. And it doesn't mean that we stop, we continue our progress forward. It's just that after the full moon, there's a momentum that has built. And when the moon finally makes its return to the original sign of the new moon, in this case Cancer, which happens on around July 26th, that's when we fully receive in the harvests of the themes that the Cancer new moon. So what are the themes for this Cancer new moon? What are we focusing our attention on? Well, Cancer season is all about our emotional realm. It's about the foundation that we are building our more public self from. The opposite sign of Cancer is Capricorn, and whereas Cancer deals with our inner emotional realm, Capricorn deals with our career, our reputation, our status out in the public field. And so with Cancer being the sign of this new moon, it is calling us to deal with our emotional realm. And what we can expect with the transits surrounding this Cancer new moon is a surge of emotion, possibly a surge of passionate emotion, one that needs to be channeled wisely, directed wisely, so that we're not projecting our unresolved emotional pasts onto others or situations. It's calling us to step away from codependent relationships, codependent situations. It's calling us to be more self-reliant. And that also includes that taking responsibility for our emotional states. So one example is, we can have a certain drama playing out in our lives, and do we react to this drama by including everyone else, having to talk to every one of our friends about the situation and getting validation from them, or being able to deal with it in a more self-reliant way? And when we apply the law of attraction, we know that everything in reality that's playing out, we need to take responsibility for, because it is a reflection of something within us that needs to be healed. And again, I do have those membership groups. If you are looking for some support, this is the basis of why I've created these memberships, especially with these extreme times that we are going into. And last but not least, in those first 2 weeks, we are going to want to use those mind over matter mind states, that heightened sense of intuition that we harvested last month, and take that forward with us. There are quite a lot of deceptive tactics, a lot of coercive tactics, manipulative tactics being played out, almost relying on the reactions that many in more unconscious states would be are anticipated to have with these surges of emotions coming in. So again, the whole call is to get out of codependent states into more self-reliant ones, and be very careful about codependent entanglements. All right, so those are the first 2 weeks, and then once we reach the full moon, the Capricorn full moon, on July 13th. This is when the height of the tension becomes so much that shifts need to happen. And with those shifts, breakthroughs of feeling more solid, ready to step up with more responsibility. This would be unfolding over the last 2 weeks, with full harvests coming in on July 27th, if we have done the work. There's quite a lot astrologically going on in this next Cancer new moon cycle. As you know, as we step into it right before the Cancer new moon, Neptune is going to retrograde, meaning we really need to internalize that sense of intuition, really go into deeper states spiritually. And also we have Chiron going retrograde at the end of this moon cycle, which will have us really internalizing any core wounds that we have and processing those over the next several months. But one of my favorites is that Venus and Mars are making their first aspect to each other since March 3rd of this year, when they came into conjunction with each other, conjunct Pluto, and that really called for a new beginning between the masculine and feminine sides of our minds, really calling us to profoundly change what that means, and also go after things that we want to manifest for ourselves in our lives. And again, I talk about that more in depth, or I will be talking that more in depth on the membership group. But I do want to wrap this up, and with that, just give a little bit of a cautionary notice. Remember to stay in those critical states of discernment. There's a lot of nefarious stuff happening out in the collective, lots to do with that South Node in Scorpio. This is a new moon that's square Jupiter. That's what's causing a lot of the surge of this emotion that needs to be channeled correctly. But so too are both the new moon and Jupiter making a sesquiquadrant aspect, which is an uncomfortable aspect to the South Node in Scorpio, indicating that there are coercive, manipulative, underhanded tactics being played, hidden agendas, codependencies, and those are definitely ones that we want to steer away from with this surge of emotion. Again, we want to use those mind over matter states, address any issues that we need to address regarding staying balanced emotionally, so that we don't get tempted into these codependent situations. And last but not least, I do want to make mention that the Mercury retrograde has not fully completed as of yet. We have the post-Cazimi that's happening on July 16th. And those dates that I mentioned earlier, April 30th, May 7th, May 22nd, June 3rd, June 11th, June 14th, and June 21st. If we can connect dots to situations that were playing out around those times. It doesn't have to be all of them. You can just connect dots. Pay attention to that, especially as they relate to anything developing on July 16th, which is 3 days after the Capricorn full moon. All right, guys, I will leave it at that. Wishing everyone a blessed Cancer new moon. And again, you can check out more of my work on astrologybylyra.com. You can check out one of my subscriptions, and also know that I do take private consultations as well. So if you need more one-to-one support, you can look at that as well. All right, bye for now.